Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Dr. Joey interviews Christian business professionals just like you to discover their secrets for working faith positive in a negative world. Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett.
Faith Positive Nation, why is it that we as Christians find it so challenging to talk about money? I mean, it's one of those taboo subjects that we seem to want to skirt around or not really address. And how many church members get upset because the preacher preached on money this Sunday, you know? But today we're going to talk about money. And we're going to talk about it from a biblical perspective that, if you have yet to read one of his books, will absolutely revolutionize the way you as a Christian think about financial stewardship and biblical stewardship and the way that you handle your own money so that you can use it to glorify God who, oh, by the way, gave you this money anyway. My guest today is Ron Blue, who is the founding director of Kingdom Advisors. Ron has been an underachiever when it comes to writing books. He's only written about 20 books, and they're all on biblical financial topics. Never Enough is the name of one of them I really want to recommend to you. Never Enough, ? 3 Keys to Financial Contentment. Ron has most recently also created a small group curriculum called God Owns It All, and he is CEO of the Ronald Blue Institute for Financial Planning at Indiana Wesleyan University. Back in 1979, he founded Ronald Blue and Company, which happens to be the largest Christian financial planning firm in the U.S. Ron has a delightful wife, Judy, 5 children, 13 grandchildren. Ron, are there any plans for a 14th?
No, but if you want some of the 13, I've got extras.
Well, I'm a pops in training. I don't know how you're going to choose which one to give me, but having 2 daughters.
Well, I get to make the choice.
Oh, okay. Well, having 2 daughters, I'm really hoping God gifts me with grandsons. So if you got a grandson you can spare, I'll take one. Ron, welcome to Faith Positive Radio. We're absolutely delighted by the gift of your time and wisdom today. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm looking forward to it very much. Thank you for asking me.
It's my pleasure. Ron, money is that topic that we as Christians, for whatever reason, and I suspect you've heard all sorts of reasons, just seem to have difficulty talking about. What are some of those reasons that we as Christians have difficulty talking about money?
Well, I think for one thing, the way you spend money is it really a reflection of your goals, your values, your priorities, your belief system. And that's one reason. The other thing is that it is really confusing. There's 3,000, I think we see 3,000 advertisements a day, I've heard. And I like to tell people I didn't even know what I needed till I went to the mall.
Right.
So I think that it's difficult to talk about because it's a pretty intimate topic about what you really think and believe. And so you're always exposing yourself whenever you talk about money. And it's probably one of the hardest things for husbands and wives to talk about.
Because it really exposes what you treasure, what you value. I mean, Christ said it best, where your heart, where your treasure is, there's your heart. And so when we're exposing that, when you look at somebody's checkbook register, you see what it's all about, or their credit card statement, right?
You really do. And I like to say that financial stewardship, 2 things about it. Number one, it's not stewardship, but it's the tool of stewardship. Because stewardship is much bigger than just money. We tend to talk about stewardship as money, but really whole life stewardship is my time, my talents, my treasure, my influence, all of those things that God has given me, I'm a steward over. And money is one of the tools to use to accomplish a lot of those other talents and so forth that he's given me. And I think the other thing about money is it's the one area of the Christian life you can't fake.
Wow. Say that again. That's
Well,
gripping.
yeah, you think about it, and if I'm a believer, I can fake prayer, I can fake evangelism, I can fake getting along with my wife.
Mm,
While I'm sitting in church, I can fake being a good father. I
mm,
can fake a lot of things. Um, but what I can't fake is what my checkbook reveals.
mm,
And it's maybe the most objective measure of spirituality that there is. And
mm,
I don't say that in a condemning way. I say that in a truthful way so that people understand that how they handle money is important to God. There's more
mm.
said about money in the Bible than any other topic. So there's probably less preached about it than any other topic.
Yeah, preachers are really see it as a taboo subject, right?
And
But
they really do. But the other interesting thing is that a biblical worldview approach to money is not taught in Christian high schools or in Christian universities.
no, no.
And yet it is the most talked about subject in the Bible, but even universities do not consider it to be academic.
Mm.
And so they don't teach it.
Yeah, yeah. And so we wind up with graduates with all this student debt who really don't know how to biblically attack that mountain of debt and deal with it in a way that honors God, right? Or you're talking about
Well,
ministers not preaching about it and there's more in the Bible about it. I remember once I got a call from a church, Presbyterian church, and I love Presbyterians, okay? Preached in a lot of their churches. But they called me and said, Dr. Joey, would you come preach in our worship service this Sunday? I said, oh, is your pastor out of town? No, it's Stewardship Sunday, and our preacher doesn't preach on money. So here I am at a Scotch Presbyterian church. Preaching on money. So I totally understand what you're talking about. And yet, where is the disconnect? If the Bible talks more about money than any other subject, Ron, why don't we talk about it?
Well, one of the things is, I think, confusion.
Mm.
I had a pastor ask me not too long ago. I had dinner the night before with one of his largest donors, and this person was probably worth $100 million, and he gives away millions of dollars. Very generous person.
Mm.
And this pastor was talking to me about, he was going to do a series on generosity, and he wanted to ask me some questions. So, but what he said, the one question he asked me was revelationary to me.
Mm.
Because I thought it put its finger on something. He said, how do I preach when I'm talking about money to somebody over here that's worth 100 million and a student who's deep in debt?
Wow.
And, but it revealed what was of concern to him. He obviously is trying to meet the needs of his congregation. And God gave me an answer that, I know it came from him. I'd never been asked that question. But when I said it, this happens to me a lot. When I get a question like that, Lord, give me wisdom, you promise. And
yeah, now would be good.
And the question, yeah. And I said to him, I said, Steve, I said, when you talk about marriage, do you change your message for the age of the audience?
Wow.
And he said, no. And I said, the reason you don't is because you teach biblical principles and wisdom.
Wow.
And when you talk about money and you talk about principles and wisdom, you're talking to everybody because they don't change for the amount of wealth.
That's brilliant.
I think that's one of the reasons, probably one of the best reasons for a pastor not to want to talk about money is they're afraid they don't know enough and they don't know how to communicate to both ends of the spectrum, those that are wealthy and those that are poor. And yet the principles don't change. So I'm having more fun now than I've ever had because I'm talking about this a lot.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter whether you're have $100 million in your bank account or whether you have $1,000 in your bank account, just like it doesn't matter whether you've been married 60 years or you've been married 6 months, right?
That's right. Exactly right. And principles never change. I like to tell my financial planning friends, I said, if you're giving biblical counsel when you talk about money, you know that principles are always right, they're always relevant, and they're never going to change. So I said, why don't you put on your business card, my advice is always right, always relevant, and it's never going to change.
And we're not talking about picking stocks here.
No.
We're talking about principles which drive all those decisions. So have you had anybody, has anybody taken you up on that?
No compliance department will allow it.
So how did your interest peak and lead to where you are today? I mean, how did you get interested in biblical stewardship around finances?
Well, just a couple of weeks ago, I started reading, I was going to read through the Bible. I was going to use the Message, Gene Peterson's book. And I read the introduction, and he said something that helped me understand how I got to where I am. Was he said he had been teaching theology in a university, and then he became a pastor, and he realized that there were two languages out there. One was the language of the world, and the other was the language of the Bible. And he said he saw his job as bringing those two languages together in a way that's practical and meaningful.
Wow.
And when I looked back, this was not by design whatsoever, but I started my career 50 years ago on Wall Street and worked there for 3 years. And then for 7 years, I had, like I said, I went to Main Street and had a CPA firm. And then during that time, I got saved, read some of Larry Burkett's materials, and got interested in the finance side of God's Word. But what I realized is I knew the language of Wall Street, and now I was being exposed to the language of the Bible. And I spent then my professional career of putting those two languages together in a way that communicated in a very practical and helpful way to people who are wanting to make financial decisions. And I spent 25 years doing that. And to me, that was the proof of concept.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, exactly. 25 years, right?
Yeah. My staff used to say, are we a business or a ministry? And my answer was always, yes.
That's right.
I said, I don't care what you want to call it. We're either a ministry that's run like a business or a business that has a ministry purpose. But there is no distinction between the two.
Wow. Now speak to business people, because that's who watches and listens to Faith Positive Radio. Speak to business people about that very thing, because so often we think that in order to be successful in business, we have to adopt an ethical code that is more like the world's, or we have to become a ministry and then we're not interested in making money. But I don't see it that way, but so many of us do. Speak to that emphasis, that dual emphasis of business and ministry.
Well, I think it's even broader than business and ministry. It's people they tend to separate the world's way of thinking and talking and acting from the biblical way of thinking, talking, and acting. And yet there's so much evidence of God at work in business. And when you put the two together why can't you operate a business on biblical principles? They work. Yes. And there's a lot of evidence of that. You think of David Green and Hobby Lobby and Truett Cathy at Chick-fil-A, and I just picked up a book, was entitled Make All You Can and Give All You Can, written by a businessman, and he outlines the biblical principles that govern his business life, and they work. So part of the reason is that we tend to think that the Bible's not practical. One. Two, I think also my wife and I were talking about this yesterday, even that, discipleship has kind of gone out of vogue. It seems to me. when I became a believer 40 some years ago, I was discipled, intentionally discipled. And there were ministries like Navigators and Campus Crusade and Youth for Christ and so forth that were built around evangelism and discipleship. But for some reason, I think we've gotten away from really taking people deep into God's word and helping them live out of obedience to that word. So
boy, we discovered that. Yeah, it is. We've discovered that same thing in the Faith Positive movement, and that's why we have Faith Positive fellowships and bringing business people together around biblical concepts and having them accountable to each other for taking action on those biblical concepts at their work and in their businesses. But for that very reason, for whatever reason, whether it's the church or parachurch organizations, the discipleship directly applied to the business world is lacking. And as you just so wisely pointed out, to all areas of life. Exactly.
Right. And I think the idea of accountability that you mentioned, which is a part of discipleship, but when I was building my business, my financial planning business, we had 15 offices spread around the country. And I thought, how am I going to know what kind of advice is being given out there? How am I going to control that? So I required every financial planner to have a financial planner, myself included. So I've written 20 books on finance. Actually, I've written one book 20 times, but
just with different titles, right?
Just different titles. But I can't hold myself accountable. And so it's really important for me to talk to my financial advisor. He's not telling me something I don't know from a financial standpoint.
Right.
But he is holding me accountable to the things that I've said I want to accomplish and so forth. So,
and helping you stay focused on those things that you say you want to do. And if this is what God's leading you to do, then we all need a partner to help us make sure that we get from where we are to where we want to be. Because I don't know about you, Ron, but I can rationalize anything.
That's right.
any behavior, I can rationalize it, and sometimes I even put the God stamp on it erroneously and think, well, this must be what God wanted me to do. But if I have an accountability partner who says, were you really thinking about what God wanted you to do, or asking me why, what prevented you from taking action on what you said you wanted to do? Those are the things that really keep me focused and keep my energy in the right channel. So what kind of challenges do you see today out there in the marketplace for business people who are trying to make solid, biblically based stewardship decisions with their money?
Well, it's probably broader than their money. It's probably the way they run their business. And I would say, first of all, I just finished reading a devotional by Mark Batterson. On the Circle Maker, and it's a 40-day devotional, and it really re-energized my prayer life because it's 40 devotionals on prayer. And so I would say one of the things is that if that business person is not starting his day seeking God's wisdom, spending time with him, he's not going to run his day very well. So I think it begins with prayer, which is one big issue. And the business people that I've worked with and known that run their businesses from a biblical standpoint, they're serious about their faith. And they want to know the answers that God would have them make in terms of their decisions. So they're spending time talking to God. That's one of the reasons that the big challenge is if I'm not talking to him, then I can't hope to run my business in a way that honors and glorifies him.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to stay married without talking to Judy, right?
Yeah. And sometimes her not talking to me would be good.
And I'm sure that's why she doesn't talk to you always, because
Yeah.
it's for your benefit, right?
That's right.
Yeah, but I mean, so often it seems like the pull of the world and the shove of the familiar takes us away from those intimate conversations with God and just literally investing enough time. For instance, the owner of the construction company says, hey, I've got 10 crews on site at 7 a.m. I've got to be out there to meet them. So there's no way I can get up and go. Or I've got a business meeting at 6:30, or I'm traveling all the time. Again, I can rationalize anything, and I suspect most of us as Christian business people can. So what do you say to that man or woman who keeps a frenetic schedule and knows that he or she should make prayer primary, but is just really having challenge with that?
It goes back to perhaps in a financial planning situation, maybe the best question I've ever asked. And this was right after I'd started my firm, and I was introduced to a heart surgeon who was really one of the first, and terrific guy. And he had just moved into $1 million home, beautiful home on 32 acres. And his first question to me was, what do you think about a Christian living in $1 million home? And God gave me again an answer, because I said, well, what do you think God thinks about that? He said, I don't know. And I said, how much time are you spending asking him? He said, well, I said, I don't have much time. He said, I'm in surgery at 6 a.m. and sometimes I'm on call and so forth. And I said, well, what are you doing at 4 a.m? He said, well, hopefully sleeping. I said, well, then you don't have anything better to do. Why don't you get up, spend 10 minutes, ask God.
That's right.
Well, here's what happened with this guy is he started that, and sometime later his wife told me, she said, John's spending 2.5 hours a day in Bible study and prayer. And
wow.
And he became and is today a leading evangelical leader. He's the chairman of several international mission boards and has given away millions and millions of dollars. And the interesting thing was, God never allowed him to sell that home until about 5 years ago.
Wow.
They tried to sell the home, and it never, ever worked. And that home became a center of Christian influence in the city where they were. Hundreds of people came through there in Bible studies and evangelistic things. So he had the time. It wasn't a matter of time. It was a matter of priority.
Priority. Exactly. Exactly. So again, is it what the world's telling us we ought to do, or is it what God would have us to do? I love that question, and that because you're not asking me that question. but I mean, that's a very riveting question. How much conversation do you spend with God, consulting with God about a purchase? Whether it's a home or a new vehicle, what car does God want you to drive? What home does God want you to live in? Most people I run into are more interested in asking that question like your friend did after the purchase. But the time to talk about that is before, right?
Yeah, it is. And, I talk a lot about lifestyle. And in America, and if you travel any place outside the United States, most places, that you say, we don't even know what we have.
So true.
And so lifestyle is perhaps one of the biggest indicators of faithfulness, I think. Now, it's not wrong to have, it's not wrong for my friend to live in that $1 million home. That's where God placed him. He gave him that profession.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But it's, God treats, I like to say this, God treats us all uniquely. And when I'm talking about wealth transfer, I say to families, if you love your children equally, you'll treat them uniquely, just like God treats you uniquely. So there's not formulas. And because God says without faith, it's impossible to please him. And whatever is not a faith is sin. So God wants me to live in faith, dependent upon him, every day for everything. And I don't think he didn't say thou shalt spend 37.8% of your adjusted gross income on your lifestyle.
No, he didn't put it in a formula, did he? And
no, because we would do that.
We
But he
would.
wants me to live by faith.
And we would think that would be enough, right? I put 37.8% in my lifestyle, so there we are. God must be pleased with me. When faith doesn't fit in a spreadsheet, does it, Ron?
No, faith does not. And he wants me to live by faith, which is why even when it comes to money, when I talk about tithing, for example, I believe in tithing, not because God needs the money by any means, but because God needs my heart. And so many people say, I can't afford to tithe. And I would say, well, you can't afford not to tithe. Yeah. As the beginning point, that's the training wheels of giving.
Right. Now, I've heard you talk a lot about setting a finish line and then reverse tithing from that. Talk about the finish line and reverse tithing, if you would.
Well, I worked a lot with wealthy people when I was building the financial planning practice. And what I found with that niche of people, that they really didn't have finish lines, and therefore there was never any quitting. So, it wasn't wrong to have more planes or boats or whatever it may be. But if you didn't answer the question, how much is enough, you would never quit. And I would like to ask the question, what is the finish line? And Bob Buford told me one time after hearing me talk that way, he said, I figured out how much I needed, doubled it, and gave away the rest. And I said, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because that's the point, is that it's more how much do I keep rather than how much do I give.
So the finish line is that amount of money that you feel like you're going to, or God leads you to understand that you're going to need to provide for yourself and your family for the rest of your life. And so once you reach that finish line.
I find a lot of people reached it and didn't know it.
Tell me more about that.
Well, it was, like I counseled one time with the CEO of a supermarket chain. And this was a godly couple. They lived in a trailer park, as a matter of fact. And it was a very nice trailer park. But he was the CEO of a large supermarket chain. And they wanted to maximize their giving. But they didn't know how much that could be. And I met with them, and I showed them the plan that they could give away $1 million in a very short period of time if they wanted to. He died a couple of years ago, and his widow had his client manager call me and say, Charles and I did not think that we could give $1 million away, but through your advice, we did, and we gave away millions upon millions of dollars. And I just wanted to thank you. Because they set the finish line. And that was, I like to use the heart surgeon and that other that example together, because one lived in a trailer park, one lived in $1 million home. They both gave away $1 million, and they were both doing things the right way.
Wow.
But God treats it uniquely.
Uniquely. Yeah, I love that. And that makes perfect sense, because there are over 7 billion of us here, Ron, and each of us are unique, right? I mean, knows the number of hairs on our head, which for me is easy. You, not so much, but each of us is unique, right? And so why not have a customized financial plan for each one of us to enact and live out of while we're here?
Yeah, I think people are afraid of, if they're afraid of finances, they're afraid of it because it will constrain them. There's this perception, that poverty is godly, but I don't believe that that's the way God treats all of us. I'm not saying having money is godly any more or less godly than being poor is more or less godly. But we're afraid that if we answer the financial stewardship question, that it'll limit us. When in fact, it'll bring us freedom.
Oh yeah, and the widow who put in her whole living, she got that, right?
She got that, and I have to believe that she was a joyful person.
Yeah.
I've never met a generous person who wasn't joyful.
They're having the time of their life, right? Because look at the difference they're making in other people's lives, and for the pain and suffering they're relieving and the happiness they're bringing to others, to just lift a financial burden, and they're sharing what God's given them. That's a beautiful way to live.
I encourage. It is the way to live, and I encourage non-deductible giving.
Tell me why.
Number one is if I'm thinking of the tax effect of the giving, okay, I'm really not giving. Okay. And the joy of giving money. My wife and I are getting ready to write a check for an immigrant from Africa. Family immigrated here not long ago, and the daughter is going to go to college first time.
Wow.
Just needs some money to get started. So we're going to write her a check along with others. And I would get more joy out of that than anything of helping a person with something like that. So I've gotten into the habit of just carrying some money and just giving it away.
But she's not a 501c3, to your point.
Is the point, right?
Yeah, and she's not a deduction on your 1040. So
no.
It's joy-filled living just because it's the right thing to do, right?
It is, and there's probably no greater joy in that. I mean, I've gotten terrific joy out of it. And quite frankly, my wife is the big influence on that. She'd give away everything.
Especially to those 13 grandchildren that you want to give me one or two. I think I know why you want to give me some of them now.
That's right. Yeah. They look at her as a big credit card.
Understood. Well, what other virtue is there in being a grandmother, right? Ron Blue is the founding director of Kingdom Advisors, the author of nearly 20 books. So you say you've written one book 20 times. Okay, and I know that's a joke. Is there the one that your bio lists is Never Enough, 3 Keys to Financial Contentment. Is there a favorite book of yours out of all those 20? And I know that's like choosing between your grandchildren.
There's a couple that are favorites. I did not intend to write books. I never had a desire to. I really didn't enjoy the process.
But you did it anyway.
I did. And when I wrote Master Your Money, the first book, it was 30 years ago. And I did it out of obedience. I had 5 book contracts unsolicited on my desk. So I wrote the book. And I never took any I'm not suggesting this for everybody, but I was closely affiliated with Campus Crusade, and their policy was that all the royalties stayed with the ministry. And so I put all the royalties to these books into my business. Consequently, I was never tempted to write for money, and I never spoke for money. If people want to pay me, fine. I said, just don't pay me what I'm worth.
We know what we're worth, don't we, at the end of the day?
Right.
We all live by generosity from other people.
So the speaking and the writing were a part of what I did, but they were not what I did. That's not where I got my meaning and fulfillment out of life. They just helped me do some things that I wanted to do. So
right now,
so
Master Your
Money.
That was 30 years ago. Okay, but you've updated Master Your Money, haven't you? Recently?
Yeah, it's sold over 1 million copies, and it's been in I think 6 editions of it, 5 or 6, something like that. And then Judy and I really enjoyed writing a book on training children to manage money. And if I'm going to redo a book, that would be one I'd like to redo. I had a father ask me not too long ago, he said, how do you teach your kids to manage money? And again, God gave me an answer. I hadn't thought about it, but I said, well, I tell you this, more's caught than taught. But they're going to do what you're going to do, what you're doing, one. And I said, secondly, you learn to manage money by managing money. And that's where our culture has missed it. It's really missing it today. Very few parents give their children responsibility to manage money. Consequently, they have no concept of values, if you will. We used an envelope system. And so we determined what we would spend for clothes and everything and put it into 5 envelopes, I think it was. They had a give envelope, a spend envelope, a close envelope, a save envelope. I can't remember what the other one, a gifts envelope. So we would give them at the first of the month 1/12 of what we would spend, we estimated over the year, and they would put it in their envelopes. What they learned was that when the envelope was empty,
now what, right?
Now what? And it taught them the scarcity of money. And it also taught them that if they wanted more, they could work for it. We never paid our kids for grades or chores. We said, you know what? Grades are your responsibility and chores are a part of the family. So we don't pay for things that you have to do, if you will. So anyway, it worked really well with our kids. They all of them turned out pretty well in terms of money managers, and fortunately they married with similar values. But today, kids don't have an opportunity to manage money. Very rare. I mean, they've got credit cards, but that's not managing money. They probably got a gas credit card if they're a teenager. And it's a lot different when you spend cash than when you put something on a credit card.
Yeah, it's almost magical, right? With a credit card. And, oh, by the way, mom or dad are taking care of that anyway. So all I have to do is swipe and go. And that pattern, that habit leads right on into their adulthood.
Well, I tell you, you mentioned student debt earlier, and we're working a lot in the university world. And what happens with student debt is that the financial aid offices will say, let's see what you're qualified for. And so they tell you what you're qualified for. They don't help you figure out what you really need. So,
or how you're going to pay back the loans later.
Or how you're going to pay it back. And so they overborrow. And we started a counseling service at Indiana Wesleyan University, students counseling other students on personal finance.
Sweet. That's great.
And it really answers that question. How much do I need and how am I going to pay it back?
Yeah, so that we're seeing beyond today. Because what's happened is the federal government determined eligibility, which kept creeping up, the colleges and universities, of course, in a free market system followed, right?
That's right. Yeah, the universities have no real motive to limit student debt.
In fact, the opposite is true, right?
That's right.
Not their problem. Not their problem.
Yeah.
Well, Ron, we could continue going. So I really want to encourage Faith Positive Nation to go to your website, which is kingdomadvisors.com, and discover lots of great things there. Now, the Ron Blue Institute for Financial Planning in Indiana Wesleyan University, is there a website that they can go to for that?
Yeah, ronblueinstitute.com.
ronblueinstitute.com. Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, you said earlier that the Bible talks more about money than any other subject. So I know that asking you for a favorite Bible verse is a perilous task for me, because there are all these verses more than any other subject in the Bible. But is there a favorite verse or a favorite passage for you?
Well, there's been over the years many, but and recently I've really been reflecting on Matthew 6:24. You cannot serve God and money. And I've listened to a couple of sermons. In the King James, it's called Mammon. And the reason it's called Mammon, I found out, was that that was a god at the time of Jesus, and it was the God that produced wealth and notoriety and so forth. So I think it's the only place in the Bible where it said you cannot serve God and the only one that's brought up is money. Now, many things are not right, of course, but he really laid that one out because he said, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. That's a part of that verse. So that's one that just is gripping me because it's the God of Mammon promises what only the God of the Bible can deliver. And that's security, peace, contentment, joy, freedom, you name it. Money will never, ever provide those things.
In fact, the opposite will be true. It will enslave you and keep you from all those things. Wow. Ron, thank you so much for the gift of your time today. Ron Blue is the founding director of Kingdom Advisors and also the Ron Blue Institute for Financial Planning in Indiana Wesleyan University. So you can go to kingdomadvisors.com, and you can also go to ronblueinstitute.com and find out more information. And Master Your Money is the book. Go to amazon.com or your favorite bookseller and make sure you get the latest updated copy of that. Ron, we pray God's blessings on you, your business and ministry, on Judy, certainly, and upon your kids and those delightful 13 grandchildren. And we'll talk later about which 2 grandsons I get, okay?
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Sure.
Thanks so much, Ron. God bless you.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Faith Positive Radio, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Suggest guests and ask questions when you email Dr. Joey at info@getpositive.today. And be sure to get your free gift of the 5 positive business conversations to have today coaching program at getpositive.today. Until next time, may God bless you with everything your heart can hope for and more than your mind can imagine.